Do you want to know the basics on creating yourself a multiplayer game by having people connect to each other? Alright, so to go ahead and start us off here, I gone ahead and I've got myself just a 2D scene here, and I just have two buttons in it. My buttons are sitting inside of a canvas layer. Yours don't have to be, but mine are. And I have the push, or sorry, it's called the pressed signal, connected to the script in this scene, and that just has the on host pressed, on join pressed, and I just have a little function here so I can easily hide my buttons. Right. So with this, we're going to need a few variables here. So we're going to need a peer, and as you see, that's going to be an eNet multiplayer peer, a new instance of it. We're going to have an export for our player scene. So you can go ahead and just drag your player scene into that inside the inspector. Makes it easy. Then you're going to need a port and a server. Now, if you're testing this on your own machine, you can use the one that you see here. This is just your local host. And this IP address will always return your own computer. So for me, this will be my computer. For you, that address will be your computer, and so on. Now for a port here, it's recommended that you use an open port for this, and if someone has trouble connecting, it's probably because one of those people don't have an open port. And if you don't know, or you're not sure which ports you have that are open, you can go ahead and open up the command prompt and type netstat space -aon, and you'll get results similar to what you see here. Now, under the local address section, what's after the colon is going to be your IP address, right? You see there, your port. So 135, 445, and so on are all the IP addresses that are listed here, and the ones you're looking for that are open, they're going to have the state listening. Alright, so you can pick any of those. 135 is probably open for you and probably open for most people. But just in case, if you want to use something else, you can certainly do that. Just make sure that that's open for you, and if someone has a problem connecting, that it's open for them as well. Alright. Now, obviously, if you're doing this online, you're probably going to have this server hosted somewhere else and not on your own machine, or you're going to create a designated client or server, I should say, that the user can run on their machine. But regardless, for testing, we can easily just use our local address, no problem. And for my player, I just have a simple player setup here, and it's just, we're displaying health here because I'm going to show you how to sync that stuff up. And we just have a basic movement here. We can easily use a simple get vector in this case. We don't need anything complicated. Basic up, down, left, and right work. And my ouchie is just removing a random amount of health every couple of seconds. Alright, so in our main script, once you have your variable set up here, over in your inspector, remember to set up your player scene. So if you haven't set it yet, you can go ahead and click and hit load and have your pop-up in there, or you can just drag your scene over from your file system and drop it in. And now we can actually take a look at the code to make this work. So the first thing we're going to look at is the host button, and then we'll come back and we'll look at the join button, and then we'll solve an issue that will come up, and I'll show you why as well. Alright, so on our host button, so again, I'm just hiding my buttons. You don't have to. I'm doing that. If you want to do that, cool. I'm just calling my buttons and calling the hide function on it if I'm passing in true, which of course I will be. So if you're going to be a host, we need to create the server. And to create the server, we can just call peer.createServer. And we're going to pass in a port here. And of course, this is going to be the port variable that we had. And as you saw, there are other arguments, for example, max clients. So for example, if you set this to 64, then only 64 people will be able to connect at a time to this server. And as you can see, there's multiple other options, but the only one that we need is going to be port. And next, we're going to go ahead and go to multiplayer. And we're going to set the multiplayer peer. And this is going to be, whoops, this is a property, multiplayer peer. And we're going to set this equal to our peer, which is going to be the server. Okay, so at this point we have a server, and the last thing that we need to do is we need to connect the function, or connect a signal. And the one we're going to connect is peer connected. There's a couple different ways of connecting a signal, but the one I'm going to show you here is simply just going to be multiplayer dot and then our signal that we want to connect. So I'm going to go peer connected dot connect, and then the function that we want to call, I'm just going to call mine add player. Whoops, we don't need the open close there. And just to be safe, yes, it's just yelling at me because that function doesn't exist yet. And then after we hit the host, since I'm just going to go do it with two windows here, I'm going to go ahead and call my add player function. So with that, it's going to yell at me. So I'll go ahead and create this function real quick, and that'll stop it from yelling. Cool. So how are we actually going to add this player? So when somebody connects to this server, we're going to call the add player function. And to add this player, well, we already have our player scene, so let's create an instance of it. So var player, which is of course going to be a character body 2D in our case, and that's going to be equal to our player scene dot instantiate. Oh, what I should add in there is this signal peer connect actually sends in an ID, so we actually need to put an ID in there of some kind, and that's going to be passed to us as an integer. And I'll set the default as being 1. Alright, so now our player.name. And we can go ahead and set that to a string of our ID. So the name of each player inside of our scene tree, we're going to be able to identify them by their ID that they were assigned when they connected to the server. Right, so now that we went ahead and did that, all we can do is we can just add them into the scene now. So we can use call deferred, add child, and the argument we want to pass in is player. Alright, so now with that, if we go ahead and run our scene, and I have two of them still open here, but to get there, you just head on up to debug, and you can set it to open up more than one instance. I'm setting it to 2. So when I hit host, we should have a player added. And there we go. There's my player, and I can move around. And of course, because I set my label up to show my health, which constantly removes a random amount every few seconds, we can see that ticking down. And we can see I'm roaming around. Now, of course, this does no good if the other person is also going to host. Then, well, we have two people hosting. No one's really connected. We can't see each other. So let's go ahead and take a look at what happens when we press the join button. Well, to get somebody to actually join our game, it's actually even easier. All we have to do is say peer dot create client, pass in the server, right, our IP address, and the open port that we're using. And on the next line, we simply just use the multiplayer peer equals peer. All right. So that's all we have to do. So if we were to run this now, we should be able to have multiple people joined in. Keep grabbing on the side of this. So if I hit host, there I am. And if I hit join, can I get into view? Oh, I'm not getting into view. Why is not? Well, they're being shown over here on the multiplayer basics on this side, right, on the host, but we're not seeing it on the client. Well, an issue that we're having there is we don't have the spawner. Whoops. We don't have the spawner actually set up for it. So all we have to do is go into our scene tree with our multiplayer script here. And we're going to search for multiplayer spawner. Go ahead and add that to our scene. And then in the inspector, it's going to want a spawn path. And we'll hit assign and select your root node for that. And then for the auto spawn list, add an element. And you can just drag your player scene in. And now that spawner is able to spawn in players. So just by adding that one change to this. Alright, we have our host moving around. There we go. And when someone tries to join us, well, unfortunately, we're not linked up. So how can we further create this? Not to mention, if we look at the host, I am controlling every player that does join. Well, that seems to be a problem now, doesn't it? Alright, now here's the thing. They do exist. It's in the scene. We just can't see anything there on the client that joins. So what we need to do here is we actually need to go over to our player scene, and we're going to add in a multiplayer synchronizer. And this node is responsible for syncing up everything within this scene. So in this case, this scene being our player. And what we want to sync up here is going to be our, in this case for this example, we're going to sync up the player's movement, so the player's position, as well as the text property of my label. Right, so once you add it to your scene, go ahead and click on it. You'll see this open up down at the bottom. Just select add property to sync. And of course, we're going to sync up from our character body 2D. And if you want, you can just search. I'm looking for the position property of that. And I'm going to sync up for my label, the text property. So I've got two properties I want to sync up. And if we go ahead and run this, see now if I hit host, there I am. I'm all synced up. Well, I say that, we can't really tell that now though. And I hit join, and we can see now on join, we can see all the nodes, right? Because everything has been synced up. But we kind of have a problem here. We can't really move on the host. Or sorry, we can't really move on the client. And the host is kind of controlling everybody. Well, that's not right. Well, we can see that the health is at least synced up. But why are we having this issue here? And the reason why we're having that issue is because we haven't set the authority. And the authority is essentially going to tell us what, which character ID, you can say, is going to be able to control. So, for example, since we don't have any authority here, my host, the server, is able to control all of these players. But what we want is we want to set the authority in order to set it. Basically, we're going to say only the player can control this character. All right, and the way that we're going to do that is when we enter the tree, we're going to set multiplayer authority, and then we have to pass in an ID. Now, if you remember, when our player is created, or when somebody connects to the server, they get an ID, and when we have that ID, we're setting that ID as the player's name. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use our name property, right? So we're going to use our name as the ID, and we're going to pass in, is it underscore? No, not underscore, to int. There we go. So we're going to take our name, which is the ID we were assigned when we connected, convert it back into an integer from a string, and we're using that ID to set the multiplayer authority. So if my ID matches the ID of that sprite, that's basically how we're going to move. All right, so we'll say if is multiplayer authority, and we'll just go ahead and tab in our velocity line. There we go. All right, so when we join, we create a client based on the server and port. We set the multiplayer peer equal to the peer, and when somebody connects from our signal, we're using add player, so we're creating a new character. This player is getting its name set to its ID that it was assigned when it connected to the server. And then we're taking that ID on enter tree, right? We're taking that ID and using it to set the authority. So we're saying, so if is multiplayer authority, then we can move. So if this person has access to move this sprite, they can move that sprite. And that one line, that one check, is all we need for this. So we can say host here now. All right, I'll just go ahead and move them out. And over here, we'll hit join. And you'll notice here on the host, we're not moving anyone except for ourselves now. And we can see it nicely synced up on both the client and the host. And if the client decided to move around, we can see we have no issues there, and we're only moving ourselves. All right, so those are the basics of connecting up with multiplayer, of having two people connect with each other, as well as synchronizing stats across from each other. All right, now you could modify all kinds of things with this. You can enter in and you can give your player maybe a random color if you wanted to, or spawn different types of characters. You know, whatever it is that you want to do. But anyways, those are the basics. Hopefully that was clear enough for you guys. And with that, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.